Welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast, a platform dedicated to honoring America's women veterans who dare greatly in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Sarah Scully. At Women in the Arena, we harness the power of storytelling to illuminate the human experience. Through authentic narratives, we honor the resilience, authenticity, and leadership of women who have served our country. Our name, Women in the Arena, pays homage to Theodore Roosevelt's legendary speech, The Man in the Arena, recognizing the remarkable contributions of women in traditionally male-dominated domains. We are kicking off Season 1 of the Women in the Arena podcast with a truly remarkable individual. We had the honor of sitting down with Phyllis Wilson, a trailblazer with 37 years of service in the United States Army. Phyllis shattered glass ceilings for women in the military and now leads as president of the Military Women's Memorial, where she is dedicated to honoring the history, legacy, and contributions of our nation's women veterans across generations. Join us as we delve into her remarkable journey and answer her call to action. For you to share your own story as a woman veteran or that of someone you know with the Military Women's Memorial, contributing to the ongoing history and legacy of women in the military. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss this. Phyllis, welcome to the Woman in the Arena podcast. We're so excited you're here.
I am really over the moon at the idea of Women in the Arena. What a great title.
I mean, it kind of encompasses everything that you are and what you represent with all the amazing things you're doing right now, which we're going to get into here soon. But we first want to extend our gratitude for you being here. Anybody that knows you knows that you are in a million places at once all the time, doing incredible things for our community. So thank you for carving out the time and being here and being a part of Season 1.
And Season 1, Episode 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah. It's super cool.
I feel like no pressure there, right?
I know, right? Rolling it out. Phyllis, before we get into all the incredible things that you're currently doing, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about where you're from and how you eventually joined the service and what that path looked like for you.
Yeah, it was a weird path, but I think everybody's path is a little circuitous. Nobody goes straight line. Well, nobody I've met said, I'm going to join and serve for a long time in the United States military. My dad was born and raised Amish, Pennsylvania Dutch, horse and buggy. So nobody in his family served. And my mom, her dad had served in World War I, but he died when she was only 1 year old.
Wow.
And so she never knew him. And they never really spoke about him. So I knew nothing about the military, but I knew that by the time I had turned 20 years old and I was trying to pay my way through community college with 2 part-time jobs and eating breakfast cereal for breakfast and breakfast cereal for supper, there had to be a better way because I was going so slow at like 2 or 3 classes at a time. And I thought, this is going to take me like 5-6 years just to get an associate's degree. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. My dad went through 8th grade. My mom had grown up on a dairy farm, and she did graduate high school, but that was it. And so nobody was able to steer me. And my guidance counselor, I got to tell you, guidance counselors, I hope they're much better now than they were then because they did not. I had great grades. I was National Honor Society. I wanted to be a doctor. Of course, I had no idea that meant 8 years of university time. I didn't know how you do it. I just knew I wanted to be one.
Yeah.
And so long story short, at 20 years of age, I started assessing where the heck I was and heard a commercial on the radio, be all that you can be. And I said, all right, I want to know more about this. So I found out that I could join the Army, become a German linguist, and my dad and his whole big tribe of 9 other siblings, they all spoke Pennsylvania Dutch, and I didn't. I knew basic words, but when they would be off there in group meetings and just chit-chat about things in that language and then laugh, and I'm like, what are they saying?
Yeah.
So the chance to learn a language fairly similar to that, and they were going to pay me money to do it, plus a salary, I'm like, yeah, okay, and college money. So I just needed to do 4 years. I was going to get enough money to get a bachelor's degree in nursing or pre-med, and they were going to train me in a language, and I was hopefully going to get to travel overseas. I'd never been anywhere except I was born in Ohio. We lived in Ohio and or Michigan back and forth a few times until we moved down to Florida in like 8th, 9th, 10th grade. And then oddly enough, we ended up in New York State up near Rochester, and that's where I graduated high school. But that was the extent of my travels. So I was like, I'm in, coach, put me in. I had no idea what I was signing up for. But I went to basic training then at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then stayed a heck of a lot longer than those first 4 years.
Yeah. What year was that you were sent off to boot camp?
I kind of don't want to tell you that.
Yeah.
No, it was 1981.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had turned 21 years old in basic training.
Okay. So tell us, this is a really hard question to answer, I'm sure, but you have seen the change of so much for women in the service in the time that you served, because tell us the time that you eventually retired. What year was that?
Yeah, 2018. I did
Right.
37 years.
Right.
And I really didn't know how much it had changed just before I joined. I really didn't know that we were limited to only being 2% of the military less than a decade before I joined. Couldn't hold rank above lieutenant colonel or commander 05 legally against the law to be promoted above that. And all that time in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, if you got pregnant, no questions asked, you were automatically discharged. So here I am in the early 1980s, fall madly in love with another soldier. And as fate would have it, we make babies. No amount of trying to preclude getting pregnant. I'm telling you, birth control on both sides.
Yeah.
We were both responsible for our birth control, even though we were married. Didn't matter. Those babies were going to be created one way or another, and I'm so glad that that worked out. But at the time, I will tell you, I cried in the shower when I found out I was pregnant, and I thought I have this great military opportunity, and people frowned mightily on a woman that got pregnant in the military then. All of the rumors, I only got pregnant so I didn't have to go out and do things that were ugly and uncomfortable and go out to the field and camp and, all the things that you do in the military. And now, how things have changed to where if a woman is assigned for a school or whatever, deployed, if she was breastfeeding, the government will pay to ship her breast milk home to that baby. Oh, that didn't happen for me. Yeah. I got sent to the field with a 5-week-old baby I had been breastfeeding, wow. Sent away for 3 weeks. No way to do anything except be in a lot of pain for 3 weeks. So the second child I had, I was like, I'm not breastfeeding him. Not happening. Because I was still in the Army.
Yeah.
And I thought that's what's going to happen. And so things have changed tremendously. And the trailblazers before me, and I guess for my generation, what we did, and it didn't even occur to us to say this isn't right. It just was. But we persevered and we continued. They couldn't run us out. Mm-hmm. We were still there. And I think they figured it out along the way. If we want to keep this kind of talent in the military, we're going to have to be more amenable to the additional things that happen when you create babies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It really is crazy in just a few short decades how much things can change. So tell us about what those first few years looked like in your career, and what did you end up continuing to do? What made you stay?
Yeah. So the reason I think most of us join are for totally different reasons of why any of us choose to stay. I needed college money. I wanted to travel. I was tired of eating cereal both morning and night. I mean, sorry, young people, we're looking for a solution to the current problem. Mm-hmm. And then I think as we get into the military and this zone of like-minded people, I would like to always believe I was always patriotic. Why would you go to the military if you just weren't patriotic? But I thought I'd do my 4 years. I'll take advantage of I'll serve my country well, but when I get my college money, I'm going. I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the mission as a intelligence soldier. I got to go to Germany when we still had an East and West Germany before the Berlin Wall came down. Wow. It's not been that long ago, you guys. I don't feel that incredibly ancient. I'm not feeble and walking in here on a cane. To imagine the changes that have transpired in my lifetime, and I'm not that wicked old, I'm 64, to see that I sat with a headset on and listen to East German military and political leaders and try to surmise, were they plotting anything that was nefarious and negative for both the rest of our allies in Europe and certainly for the United States. So I got hooked pretty early on that, having a top secret clearance. You get all puffed up. You think you're Superwoman or something at 21, 22 years of age. You got a new language. You're in Europe. You're helping to safeguard the world. Right. And the other people that worked with me, especially the folks that, now think about this, it's the early 1980s, and the people that were my senior mentors then had served in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. It was only 15 years prior that they had done their time in the mid to late 60s in Vietnam. Now here it is 82, 83. They know what it's like to fight that kind of a war, and they want to make sure we, the young ones, don't have to go through that. And they work us hard. I mean, they train us hard. You almost think they're merciless about it, but hard training means you're going to survive if we do end up having a war. And these men in particular were such great mentors for me. And that's what I saw at the front end of that. And I fell in love with the teamwork, the camaraderie, the patriotism. You join for money, you stay for the team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really beautiful way to put it. Tell us about, out of the many assignments you've had, ones that have been the most impactful. And I know that's a difficult question. And you touched on a little bit serving in your early years and what an eye-opening experience, especially at such a pivotal time for our world. So maybe as your career evolved, what were some really interesting or impactful moments for you?
And we talk about the opportunities for women. Women had already gone to jump school to jump out of airplanes. Crazy women that they were. God bless them. First ones in the 70s. And then all through the 80s, I was begging every time I got to a unit that I thought I might have a chance. I wanted to go to jump school. Please send me. Nope, you don't need to go. You'll never jump out in combat. We need to use those because it's a precious limited few number of these positions at any unit. And they use it for their Soldier of the Year incentive, or, now since you won that, we'll send you to jump school, which is well, don't scare me that way. But I wanted to. And it took over a decade of my being in the Army before I finally got a chance. And I ended up at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, North Carolina, home of the 82nd and 18th Airborne Corps. And when you arrive there, in the unit I was in, they issue you, whether you're airborne qualified or not, a maroon beret, which to me always signified they're airborne if you're wearing that beret. Our unit wore it whether you were or not, and I felt like a horrible fraud. But I kept just bugging until they finally said, God, we got to shut her up. Just send her. Just send her. And I went. And that was really an incredible time because there were very few women in my class and continued to be that way for a while. So that was one of those milestones. But better than that was when my sons graduated jump school, and I got to be, as a legacy, as a parent of a new airborne soldier that myself was jump qualified, I got to go down there and pin the jump wings on their chest. And oddly enough, I'm standing there because they call out any and all of the soldiers, Marines, Navy, whomever is in there, that if their parent or grandparent is there to pin them, they call them out front before they pin the entire 450 soldiers, service members. And I'm standing there in my uniform with jump wings and maroon beret. And these old men, granddads to the kids that were getting pinned, they're like, why are you up here? Are you here to escort us out to when it's time to promote, to put the pin on? I'm like, no, I'm here to pin my son. And they're like, pin your son? They couldn't wrap their brain around the fact that there could be a woman old enough to have a son that had now qualified. So that was one of those, continue to break down these barriers. Yeah, we're here and we're doing just fine, thank you. I had never became a jump master, and that's one of the things I do kind of regret that I was just all about just handing my line off, turning and getting out the door and enjoying the jump. You get a little nervous just before, but once you're out in the air of it all and you're certain your parachute is opened, do it again. Mm-hmm. It's like when your dad used to throw you way up high when you were a little kid.
Yep.
and catch you, and you're like, do it again. But while you're up there, it's like you stop breathing.
Yeah.
And that it was that way too. I would tell you another one. A decade after that, in the early 2000s, right after 9/11, there was an opportunity. I had left active duty and I was Army Reserve, but I got an email saying, hey, we're looking for military intelligence. Now I'd become a warrant officer. We're looking for some intel warrant officers to serve in this special organization. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it was counterterrorism. And this was after 9/11. I'm like, put me in, coach. I want to do this. I had become a registered nurse in the interim, but I wanted to go back. And I felt like, God, I want in on this fight. I remembered how I felt on 9/11. And I just felt helpless and just, I watched my unit leave, but they didn't need me for what they were going to go do. So I'm standing there with no platoon anymore. My whole platoon is gone, and I'm the platoon leader with no platoon. Mm-hmm. And then this opportunity came, and I ended up serving with Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC. And that's when I realized how cool some opportunities could be. And that was, I just kept staying in. I got mobilized for a year. I'm like, can I stay another year? But then I'd go back and work as a nurse for a while, and then I'm like, okay, this sucks. I really need that kind of adrenaline all over again.
Yeah.
That was, those were some great opportunities. And to work with the most professional men and women that I've ever had the honor to serve with, just incredible.
So much to piece apart there. But one of my favorite fun facts about you is that you're a nurse, but you have a career in military intelligence. I'm like, man, this woman can do everything. She can help heal your wounds, but then she can also analyze any situation, and that's just so fantastic. Tell us what it's like, or what it's been like for you to witness change in the country from post-Vietnam War with those leaders you were serving with, post 9/11, and then eventually to retirement, just like the evolution of our military and leadership in our military and what that's looked like, because that's a very unique perspective to have.
Yeah, and the nice thing is when you stay in as long as I have, they keep moving you up into those higher echelons where you have the opportunity to see our most senior leaders and how they operate and who they are. And so when I read things in the media that blast some of our senior leaders, I know them as an individual. And so, that may be how that particular person in media sees it, or they've interviewed others that have felt a certain way. I tend to hold my cards a little tight to the chest, part because I'm an intel soldier, and part because that's part of being professional, but after I had a great opportunity from 2012 to 2015 to be the most senior Army warrant officer in the entire Army Reserve as the Command Chief Warrant Officer, and walk through the Pentagon and learn how a lot of things work up on Capitol Hill and so forth. These are exposures that I could have never dreamt were possible for me. And then when I finished that, I did a 1-year senior fellowship for General Milley as he came in to be the Chief of Staff of the Army. So he did 4 years with that, and then he became the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff. And along the way, of course, there's a lot of hard decisions that he has to make. But I've heard him say things about how he wakes up at 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning, and sees the face of one of his young soldiers that died in a combat zone when he was the commander, and it haunts him. And so when people say, he doesn't give a crap about whatever, I'm like, I've seen him at his most vulnerable, and I can tell you he does care. But, he's a big guy from Boston, and he just, he comes off as brusque, and he can be very foul when he wants to be, but he gets your attention, and he will challenge you. And I think that's what a senior leader really needs to do, as I reflected on. I didn't like it the first couple of times, of course. But as I thought about it, if I knew my craft well enough and I would stand toe-to-toe with him and argue back and forth because I knew I was right, he would take it on the chin every time. But if you looked away, you flinched, you capitulated in any way, he'd go for the jugular. I mean, he just would. Because if you can't defend it, he has to ultimately make big, hard, tough decisions. And if you aren't absolutely sure and you can tell him that, why should he believe it well enough to make a decision that may send more people to their death.
Great lesson on leadership. So tell us a little bit about your leadership philosophy. And I know that can be kind of a fluffy question, but I think that the answer you just gave now about your experience working for him is very, very real and important. So tell us about, your approach as a leader.
Yeah, I think there, whether it's men and women or just by personality type, we lead very differently. And the situation can cause me to be like, I'm not asking any question. I'm telling you to do this right now. And there might be a few curse words that go with that because I was a soldier for too long and we do that. And that's when they get, my people always paid attention. When I dropped a bad word, they were shocked because I don't normally do it. But when I do, they're like, holy, she means it. But I needed them to do something quickly. It's not like I'm asking you. It's like your kid's in the middle of the street, and the cars are coming. You don't have time to go, baby, come here, come over here, come on. No, you're going to do something a little differently. Now, when it's a, office environment, you can have time to be collaborative and have those discussions and sort of feel everybody out on how they look at things. But ultimately, again, even in my current role as the president of the Military Women's Memorial, the bottom final decision is mine, but I need to gather as much information as possible and then make that decision. But I am persuadable. That's the one thing. And I think General Milley and so many other great leaders that I've had the opportunity to witness how they operated. And then just like with your parents, there's some things you might have liked and some things you didn't. And always as a child, I would say, I'm never going to do that with my kids when I grow up. But there were other things that you might not have said, park that, I want to do that same kind of a thing later. Those things don't necessarily bubble up until your kid starts to do something. You're like, you just realize you were just your mom all over again, hopefully in a good way. And that the things you said you didn't want to ever replicate, sometimes, it's real hard not to, but you do your best. And it's the same thing with leadership, I think, whether it's in a family or in an office space. It's important to get to know your people, really know them, because it doesn't make sense to me that somebody that has been a great employee, a great soldier for the entire time I've known them, and suddenly they're coming in late, they're giving me crappy work, it's not to their par. Instead of going, fix this and throw it back at them, have the conversation. What's going on? How are you really? What's going on? Because I can see we've got a problem. And if we can help them fix that, they're going to come back better and stronger for us because we took the time to know them. And I think that's really important as a leadership tool.
Mm-hmm. On the topic of assertiveness and being direct, especially when you need to be, I know plenty of women in my professional circle and personal circle, sometimes we struggle with having that assertiveness at work because of a stigma associated with it being a woman. And many of us feel the need to strike this balance at times. And I'd be curious if you struggled with that over the course of your career, or if you saw that change over the course of your career, if you found a way to be more comfortable with it and how you arrived at that point.
I think it's a journey for sure, because certainly in my 20s, I want everybody to like me. I'm likable. And I wasn't necessarily in charge of a large group of people. First a squad, 8, 10 people, and then ultimately a platoon, 30, 40. And then ultimately you're when I was the part of the leadership team for the Army Reserve, that's over 200,000 soldiers and another 12,000 Army civilians. That's a lot of people. And you're in the spotlight, no matter what you're doing. You could be in the commissary, the grocery store. Don't go there in some shabby looking holy pair of sweatpants that are saggy butt and a T-shirt that's all stretched out at the neck. Because somebody now with the phones will take that picture and go, this is our command chief?
Yeah.
So you have to be on your A game all the time. And that's really a lot of pressure and stress. But fortunately, you don't have that typically in your 20s. Mm-hmm. You get to mature a little bit along the way and get to the point where you realize, you know what? Some people just aren't going to like you, and it's not yours to own. You are who you are. You're doing the best you know how to. I've never set out to cause pain or harm, discomfort to anybody else. I have worked people really hard, especially the folks I thought were slacking. Oh, yes, I did, but I did it with them. If they failed physical fitness tests, I was out there running at 5:30 in the evening with them. When I dropped them for push-ups, I was down there doing push-ups with them. They were going to pass the next fitness test. Come hell or high water, they were going to pass.
I believe it.
And the thing was, even back in the good old days, the men were very reluctant to try to work with a young female soldier that was having troubles. They'd come to somebody that was a little bit older, a female, and say, hey, can you deal with that? Because we don't know what to do, how to say it. But over my 30s and into my 40s, and that's when I finally started to realize I can't be everybody's friend, and I shouldn't be everybody's friend. It's just like your kids. You can't be their friend. I mean, now my kids are grown, and we are very friendly with each other, and I never tell them what to do now. I certainly did. I used to empty I was a good old soldier. I would, if they were messy in their bedrooms, I would dump their dresser drawers because they just stuffed everything in there. And clean, dirty, didn't matter. I'd dump every dresser drawer and sit there with a cup of coffee in their room while they would refold and figure out, is it clean, dirty, and put it back away. But, these are the kind of things that over a number of years, you have to learn to become comfortable with who you are, because you know what? You got to live in this skin forever. Mm-hmm. And if you don't come to a point where you actually like yourself, you don't have to love yourself, because I'm not sure I'm there. But I like myself well enough. And I think if I was somebody else, I think I'd go have a cup of coffee or a drink with her. Mm-hmm. She's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to get to that point.
Do you think that you could identify ways that you got there? Because I think that juncture in your 20s and 30s is something that a lot of women leaders are dealing with. I can say I've dealt with that, getting hung up on likability, getting hung up on how are people perceiving me. And it's so true. I mean, if you don't like or love yourself, then you can't really expect to ever be comfortable in that way. So do you have any advice to people that may be navigating that maybe more insecure stage of their professional journey?
I kind of do, but at the same time, I will tell you, the imposter syndrome is real. Mm-hmm. I still have it. I know lots of men that still feel like, how did I get here? I didn't do enough to be at the pinnacle or wherever they are. So you always wonder, what happened? What do I need to do more? And we strive to hold up our end of the bargain, especially when we are put in positions of authority and leadership over so many people. And sometimes just over one person is all it takes. But I think when you recognize that there are always going to be things that will crop up in your own brain, they do for me, this imposter syndrome. Who do you think you are? You're not, it doesn't matter how many college degrees, how many books you've read, how many people you've led. You can always be better. And I think that's what makes good leaders, honestly, is by never feeling like, okay, I got it all figured out, because I don't think anybody ever does. And I would tell anybody listening that if you get to the point that you feel satisfied with where you are as a leader, get scared. Get really scared. Go talk to somebody and let them shake you and say, no. You'll never be as good as you could possibly be by being uncomfortable in leadership roles.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. So moving forward to right now, tell our listeners about the Military Women's Memorial, your role there, the mission behind everything that you all are doing.
And how much time are you going to give me to do that?
I know, it's a lot.
Wow, it is. And I will tell you, so here I am playing soldier all these years, and in 1997, they dedicated and opened the Military Women's Memorial at the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery. I was down at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, North Carolina, raising kids, playing Army, being a nurse at the same time, and on my civilian side, never heard anything about this massive, beautiful national memorial to honor the military women being dedicated. I have met so many women that were there opening day. Over 40,000 people were there opening day. Many of them were World War II women. And one of the women that was there was actually from World War I.
Wow.
Yeah, so she was 102 years old in 1997, and she spoke, and she fit into her Navy uniform that she wore in 1918.
Wow.
And her son, who was 80 years old and a retired Navy captain, helped her out to the podium. And he stood beside her as she tried to read her thing. And she said, "When I served in the Navy, women were not even allowed to vote." Can you fathom?
No, I can't.
But she served. She
know.
raised her hand. She joined because there was an opportunity unlike anything that had ever happened before in our country. And because of her and other women of World War I, in 1920, the right to vote amendment was passed and signed by the President of the United States. And they argued all the time before that the reason women could not vote was because we weren't full citizens, in that we did not serve and defend our country. And we didn't serve and defend our country because Congress had passed a law that said only men could serve and defend our country. So therefore, we couldn't vote because it was against the law for us to. It was a horrible circular argument, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there was a loophole in the Navy Reserve statute of who was permitted to serve, and it only said you must be a U.S. citizen. Every other framework of the military said you must be a man and a U.S. citizen. Well, the senior person in the United States Navy said, "Get them in here before they catch this." And over 10,000 women lined up for blocks at recruiting stations to sign up. And then they were instantly called to active duty, and they served during World War I. And because of that, I would argue women have been fighting for decades, 40, 50, 60 years for the right to vote. Now these women did it, and this is one of those women standing there. We have the recording of her saying this. "When I served in the Navy, women were not even allowed to vote." And Congress fixed that shortly after the war was over, and they went in and they added, you must be a man and a U.S. citizen to serve in the Navy Reserve.
Wow.
So in the 20s and 30s, no more women served except in the nurse corps. But the Military Women's Memorial, when we opened 27 years ago, I never knew about it. I never heard about it until I was stationed at the Pentagon, which is one metro stop away from Arlington National Cemetery. And a friend of mine had told me she was having a promotion ceremony, and I was supposed to go there. Well, I walk out of the metro towards the memorial, and I saw this beautiful half-curved wall with a reflecting pool out front. No other memorial in the D.C. area has an inside. It's a wall, like the Vietnam Memorial Wall, the World War II, or the Korea, which is all these statues. There's no inside. So I thought, how cool, she's getting promoted out here by the reflecting pool. And while I'm waiting, it's like, it's almost time. Why is nobody here? So I'm looking around, and I see the door at the end of the building, and I go in, and I am smitten. This is in 2013. Mm-hmm. I am absolutely like, what the heck? How did I not know about this? And we tell the story of women all the way back in the Revolutionary War when they disguised themselves as men, till today, when every career field, every rank, everything is wide open. If you can qualify for it, you can do it. And that's what the memorial is all about. Our mission is simple. We honor and tell the stories of America's servicewomen. But when I found out about it in 2013, of course, I was a little busy doing full-time Army work, and then I retired in 2018, and I took a contract job back in the Pentagon and as an intel civilian. And then I heard that they were doing a national search for the next president of the Military Women's Memorial. The first one had been Brigadier General Wilma Vaught, one of the first women ever to be promoted to general, because we weren't allowed to hold that rank. Mm-hmm. So she was the founder. She's now 94 years old, still alive and up here in Northern Virginia. And the second one, who was an interim, she never wanted it, is Major General D. McWilliams Army. And she finally put her foot down and said, you better find somebody else, because come October, this gal is gone. So they did a national, almost a year-long search. And I had a couple of people encouraging me to apply, but I had my own small nonprofit, no paid staff, no anything like that. And but I said no, because I understand fundraising well enough that when you get a letter or somebody going out to talk and they're a general or an admiral and they're asking you to give, America tends to open up their wallets. I'm a Chief Warrant Officer 5. What does that even mean to most of America? Not a doggone thing. So how do I help fundraise? And I said, I feel like I might have a good enough skill set, but I don't have the title that would go on the bottom of these because you have to beg for money. You just do. We're not federally funded. And great sage advice by an Army 2-star retired. And she said, it will always only be generals or admirals that run these big nonprofits if they're the only ones that apply. And I thought about that, but I was pretty content with my lovely job in the Pentagon at the time. And as fate would have it, just a couple of days before the end date to submit your, interest into this position, still wasn't interested, but I was running late, and I always have a Fitbit on. And so I park out normally. This time, because I was running short on time and I was supposed to pick up cupcakes or cookies for the office. So I parked close to the grocery store in a veteran parking spot. And I jumped out. And as soon as I did, this guy, he was waiting. Who's going to park there? And he hollered, "Excuse me, that's veteran parking." And I said, "Yes, sir, I know." And the next thing he says, "Is your husband with you?" And I said, "No, sir, I'm a veteran." And he looks at me like, "No." And he asked me, "When did I serve?" And I told him from 1981 to 2018. And then he threw the red flag, the BS flag out and said, You can't. That's more than 30 years. You're not allowed to serve more than 30. So I thought, he knows a little bit about the military. I bet you he served. And we had this conversation. And at the end, we parted our ways. I went inside. And I got to thinking that if I had been a man that even had never served and parked in a veteran spot and got out, I don't think he would have said anything. Mm-hmm. So, I know there's more than 3 million women that have defended this country, and it just got under my skin just enough to think, how many of us does it take to serve this country until we can park in a veteran spot and not be challenged for it? Mm-hmm. It was just enough to gall me. I went home, I pulled up I have a Intel resume, a nursing resume, because I've been a director of nursing at multi-facility installations, and then I have my nonprofit. And so I pulled that one out, dusted it off, shot it in, and be careful what you apply for, everybody, because you might just get it. It's like a dog chasing a car. What if you catch it?
Right.
Well, I caught the car, and it has been a crazy ride for almost 5 years now. I have learned more in the 5 years working at the Military Women's Memorial about military women than I did in 37 years being one of them. It's crazy.
That's amazing. I know that it's so hard to choose out of the, like you said, millions of stories that, exist within the work that you all are doing. But can you tell us one, maybe it doesn't have to be like a favorite, but just one that's particularly special that is a great example of, wow, like the women's stories that we're sharing are just remarkable and special and unique?
There's so many of them that, again, I'm learning new ones every day. And I hope that I get to keep doing that for a long time, even when I'm no longer the president. But I hope then I'll be able to write, whether it's books or whatever. But I tell a lot of people when we go through the memorial, it's 220 feet where we start Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and all of the eras in between. But then we get to Korea and Vietnam and so forth. But there's this one lovely young Army private, Sarah Keyes Evans. And most people have never heard of her, but they've heard of Rosa Parks, who refused to move to the back of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, 3 years before Rosa Parks, Sarah Keyes Evans, in her dress military uniform, was going home from New Jersey to North Carolina, and she refused to move to the back of the bus. And they arrested her, and she stood overnight in a jail cell because the mattress was moving by itself. Whatever mice and stuff was inside of that mattress, she's like, nope, I'll stand. In a dress uniform and heels, overnight, until they released her. She gets home, and her dad, who is a train conductor, knows that even as a black man, Interstate Commerce Commissions says if you take a train or any other public conveyance across state lines, all bets are off. You can't make black people move to the back or have separate cars or all of these kind of things. So they brought in some big guns, and it took 3 years of a civil lawsuit for Sarah Keys Evans to win the case against the Interstate Commerce Commission that said, you're right, she should not have been forced to move, and they upheld it. And it came out, and of course, this is the 1950s. It goes across all of the black newspapers because there's separate newspapers for our black Americans, Jet magazine, which is still around, and the NAACP used Western Union telegrams to send it to every major office across the country. Well, Rosa Parks worked with the NAACP in Montgomery, Alabama, and this all came out 6 days before Rosa said, I don't think I'm going to go to the back of the bus today. So we cannot verify that Sarah Keys Evans' challenge, winning the civil lawsuit, was enough to give Rosa Parks the courage that day to go, nope, not doing it either. But these are those stories, these little... Sarah Keys Evans just passed away, I think, November of 2023.
Wow.
I mean, last year. So she was alive for a long time. Rosa Parks has been gone. Had she still been alive, I'm telling you, I would have made the trip to go ask her, what made you decide that was the day, the time you're finally not going to move to the back of the bus?
Yeah.
So we can never know, but I think it's awfully interesting.
It is.
And that people should know that there was a woman that challenged what was right 3 years beforehand, and her name is Sarah Keys Evans.
Thank you so much for sharing. What a remarkable story. And something I love so much about what you all do is you highlight stories that may never make it to a history book because of rank and leadership in the military. Oftentimes it's the most senior leaders that get remembered, but many of times it's the service members that contribute a small window of their life that do something that ignites a spark and creates an incredible movement or changes someone's life and they go on to do something great. So I love that you all do that. And it's a great example of the butterfly effect, which is what we believe in here. And we believe in storytelling, creating a butterfly effect and a chain reaction of more great things that are going to happen. Tell our listeners about some initiatives that you all have going on right now. And just, I know that there's a lot, but if you can pick some that you'd like to talk about.
Well, our biggest one, of course, is the reason we can tell stories like Sarah Keys Evans or Julia Child is in our database as well. She served during World War II. And because Julia Child, the chef, was 6'2", and they were just now creating uniforms for women in the military, and they said, thank you, no, you cannot join the military. We're not making a custom uniform for a gal that's 6'2". So she joined the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. And because of that, when she was shipped over into Asia, she meets a guy by the name of Paul Child. They ultimately marry. They come back to the States. He joins the State Department, ends up in Paris, France. She gets her first bite of French cooking, and shall we say, the rest is history. But she uses her GI Bill to go to the Cordon Bleu School of Cooking. So her GI Bill, thank you, U.S. government and the Department of Veterans Affairs for making sure we now, maybe Julia Child would not have become the Julia Child we know and love because of that. But her story's in our database. That's the most important piece. We have 315,000 women's stories like Sarah Keys or Julia and so many more. But with 3 million plus, that means 90% of the stories that we should be able to tell and share, to your point, whether they serve for a couple of years or a couple of decades, we want and we need desperately every one of those stories, however far back, or even those that are currently serving and absolutely alive. My story is in there now. It does not wait until you're out of the military, until you're deceased and somebody else has to tell that. We want firsthand accounts of your memorable experience during your time in service and where you went, where you were assigned. Not only if you were in a wartime, if it was Cold War era, if you never left the United States. Every one of us do our part. And trust me, until you come down on orders to go someplace, you can want all you want. It's not going to happen. And it's nobody's fault if you don't end up a certain location. So when people tell you you are not a veteran because you didn't go to a combat zone, push back. Push back hard, because you're not standing up just for yourself, but for millions of women because for a long time we weren't allowed to go those places. Oh, it was not fair. We were, wilting wallflowers or something, and we just, God knows what would have happened to us. We've done fine.
Right.
But that's the biggest one. And so anybody can go to womensmemorial.org, womensmemorial.org, top right, create an account, and then you can find a servicewoman. There's a tab in there within your account. You can put in any name that you can think of, whether it's Sarah Keys Evans or somebody that you may have served with, and see if they're, or your grandma. Maybe she served in World War II. Mm-hmm. See if her story's in there. And if it isn't, and you know a woman no longer living, tag, you are it. We need you to do your level best to make sure her story is as complete as possible in there. We'll take it if it's just the years of service and ideally a photo, and where she served, what era she served in. But think about this, 100 years from now, when any of our listeners are not around, who's going to know what you did? Mm-hmm. If these stories aren't captured soon and we continue to perpetuate this into future generations, it's important to prove that what American women have done to defend this country, that's the biggest one. And then we have a lot of programs. We do very special events, certainly on Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And there's always over 200 honor flights come to visit us every year, whether it's all men or all women or a mixture thereof. They love it. And again, we're the only one with an inside, mm-hmm. which means we have really good restrooms. So they love coming to see us as well. Yes. But when they see the exhibits and the stories, the uniforms, they all get pretty choked up, even the men. They say, thank God that some of those women were there for us.
Mm-hmm. And it is a remarkable memorial. I have been fortunate to go twice, and both times I've been, it's just been so captivating and just so unbelievably special. So something I love doing on holidays with the database that you all have set up is I will just search for a service member or look at the stories that you all share on LinkedIn and social media. And it's a great reflective way to read those stories that, may not be reaching as many people, or maybe that service member doesn't have living family or friends that are still honoring their story. And it's just so special and important to go back and read and just see the remarkable things that women have done, especially in those earlier generations where they were not recognized, honored, compensated, or whatever you want to call it, for the amazing things that they were doing.
Yeah, we have actually also a big book room where back before we were all digital, where people could register completely online and own their account for life. In the 80s and 90s in particular, people were mailing in the registration form with documents and photos. And so we have this massive room with three-inch binders, thousands and thousands and thousands of these stories. So anytime you want to have a great day, just go grab one of these out of our room, sit down, and we started flipping. And I did that just yesterday or the day before. And as I flipped through, I'm like, that looks like Civil War. There was a photo of a woman disguised as a man in the Civil War, served with the Union Army, and had done such a darn great job of it, disguised as a man, had actually been made a honorary regimental sergeant of this Michigan infantry unit. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm reading the whole story that the family had submitted in, and it's all verified. It's not just we think maybe. I'm like, how do we find these incredible stories? And the stories of our women, of course, they weren't even permitted legally to serve. So it's a couple hundred perhaps that actually disguised themselves in the Revolutionary and Civil War. And then the Spanish-American War, women signed nursing contracts, 2,500 of them, and went to Cuba and the Philippines and served. That's what the genesis was for the Army Nurse Corps. But then we were limited, as I said, to 2% of the military for the longest time. Now, in just the last 30 years, more women have served in the military than all the time before that, back to the Revolutionary War. And it's these women now that are currently serving or have recently served that say, I was just doing my job, no big deal, my story's not important, and I have to tell you, you're wrong. You're so, so wrong. it's not about an individual. It's about a collective story, and we can't tell the narrative completely unless we get all of the stories. And again, it isn't about what we have or are doing. It's what those women did for us, like the Navy woman. When I served in the Navy, couldn't even vote. You owe it to her to put your story or somebody you know's story into that database, because I can't write the next generation's stories when they all go, no big deal. You have no idea. In just 10 years, women are now infantry, rangers, all of the things that they could have never imagined. We have 4 women now that are 4 stars currently serving. 10 women ever have been the 4 stars. 4 of them are doing it right now. And yes, that's cool, but it's to your point, it's those that are the younger that do the 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and then that's their chapter of military service, and now they go on into whatever they choose to do for the rest of their lives, but it shapes who they are, and that service to America stays with them.
Absolutely. And we touch on that in this podcast, that it could just have been a sliver of your life, but it will stick in your heart and in your head and everything you do forever. And it's important to highlight all those stories. So I know a large base of our listeners is going to be female service members, and I'm hoping that this is a call to action to share their story and share their families and friends. So thank you for that.
I met a lady recently, on July 1st, she will turn 107 years old. She lives here in Northern Virginia. She's a Navy nurse of World War II. She served for 2.5 years. And she tells us to this day at 106, almost 107, those were the best years of my life.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah. That isn't, it makes me emotional.
And those are the ones we owe it to. When it was hard, they answered America's call. And now we're answering it and we think nothing of it because it's become so normalized. Mm-hmm. But don't let the fact that it seems normalized, we are a very rare breed. 3 million ever women and about 2 million living women veterans. Mm-hmm. That's not that many out of 330 million plus Americans. Mm-hmm. That's not very much of us. And that's why we still get challenged when you park in a veteran spot or you don't look like a woman that might have been in the military. I'm never sure what that's supposed to mean.
I don't know either, but it's definitely something that I've heard before. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, you have children that have served in the military, and I would love to hear about, I know we touched on it a little bit with the airborne school graduation, but what that's been like and how it's kind of shaped the way that you look at service and look at parenting, seeing your children go through their military service as well.
Yeah, so I have one son earlier this year. He retired from the Army.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, what the? Again, you don't realize how old you are till you catch yourself in the mirror, because in your head, you're still like in your 30s, right? Yeah. It's like, he can't be retired, but he is. So yeah, 4 sons, all combat, Afghanistan, Iraq. And at times we were in theater together. You know, one of us might have been in Afghanistan. One time both of us were in Iraq. 2 of us were in Iraq. And he was able to get a helicopter flight over to where I was in Balad. And we promoted him to E5 there on my little compound. So that was cool. It's easier to go to war yourself than it is for somebody you care about, certainly. And I think that's why for all of the families, you know, when they say, oh, no, I didn't serve. I'm just a spouse, or I'm just a military brat. Oh, trust me, you served. Mm-hmm. You served a lot. You know, you cried in the shower along the way, wondering what's going on with my spouse, my mom, my dad. You know, are they going to be okay? You don't want to listen to the news, but you can't help listening to the news. That's wholly different. And for me, I loved going and serving in a combat zone. I did. I didn't love it when my kids went, but I knew that they were needed and it was their choice. And I was very proud of them. And I, in a twisted kind of way, I know this sounds weird, but you have to rationalize it. And I've been a hospice nurse, so death and dying is something I've had to deal with. But this is going to sound so bizarre. I would rather, if my son was going to die at an early age, it was defending his country, than wrapped his motorcycle around a tree and some for driving stupid fast on a highway here in the United States. I mean, if I have to choose, not that I want either to happen, but there's that sense of my son gave his life for the country, or my son was just being being stupid. And sadly, we've had so many of them that thought they were Superman because they went and fought in a combat zone. They come back, they buy these crazy fast motorcycles, and within 3 months, they've killed themselves. And you're like, oh my God, you went to war.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. But I've always been very proud of their service.
Yeah.
But it's different. It's way easier to be the one that goes.
So special. And you have grandchildren, correct?
I do. I have a lot of them. I have 16 of them.
Talk about being a cool grandparent.
Maybe not. I'm pretty strict.
You've got some stories to tell.
But they don't mind. All of the kids, whenever I'm around them, they seem to be okay. And if I take, give mom and dad a break and take the kids out to dinner, they know that if we're at a restaurant, I don't play. You will act like a gentleman or a young lady when we're in a restaurant. When we get in the car, if you want to bounce. And when I've taken kids across country, once we get to the hotel room, if you want to jump on the bed, jump on the bed. I'll take you in the pool. You can be as crazy. But when we're sitting down to a meal, I don't play. And they know that. But they've never caused me reason to threaten them. The mom look every once in a while. But no, now they know. And we just never have that conversation anymore.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, I know that you encounter incredible women all day because of the work that you do. But if you had to pick a woman in your life, and it could be from any chapter of your life, childhood, military service, post-military service, that has inspired you, encouraged you, could be someone that you don't even know, who would you say is your woman in the arena, your woman that you've seen living boldly that inspired you to do the same?
Oddly enough, I just recently, in my role, because I have to fundraise and because I have to have really powerful programs to invite America to come pay attention to the Military Women's Memorial, I've learned to be fearless in asking somebody to participate and be involved with. And I don't know how some of your listeners feel about this, but this is me, and I've served my time, and I feel like the whole time I was in the military, the First Amendment, freedom of speech was gone. I couldn't say what I thought. Well, now I can. So I reached out to Sheryl Sandberg, who recently made a documentary called Screams Before Silence about the Israeli women that were attacked on October 7th, raped, and then murdered. So Screams Before Silence. And, of course, she does this incredible program called Lean In. And she's really looking at ways to empower women. And our point, again, is that rape should not be a tool of war. And I think as a military person, this needs to be a conversation. The Military Women's Memorial should be the place to have some of these tough conversations. And so I've reached out to her to invite her to come and have a chat with us, a fireside chat about this. And I think what she's willing to do when we know that, look at the campuses, the universities, and so forth, it's really painful to watch what I'm witnessing in the United States. I can't wrap my head around it. And likewise, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been to the memorial a number of times, went to Harvard, and then finished and graduated at Columbia, and 2 universities where these massive demonstrations have happened lately. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg been to the memorial, has spoken there, and is laid to rest just up the hill behind us. And so her daughter, Jane Ginsburg, still works at Columbia University, and it hurt my heart. And so these are the kind of women that are so involved in really the fabric of America. And up at the grave marker for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her husband Martin, people leave these painted stones, a very common Jewish thing, coins and stones all up there. Well, there is no grave marker in Arlington National Cemetery that is exempt from them collecting all of them and disposing of it. They just can't possibly keep the volume of mementos that are left at 400,000 graves. And so nearly every week I go up to RBG's grave and collect up all the stones, the coins. We're collecting all these coins, and we'll see how much it comes to one day. But I take a picture of the rocks that are painted and send the pictures to Jane, the daughter. and basically say, how are you doing? These people are leaving these for your mom. How are you doing at Columbia right now? And I said, I just can't imagine what. RBG was the first female professor at Columbia, and as Jewish as the day is long. And I just can't fathom from her stepping up into that position in 1959 to where we are now. And so these are the kind of women that I want to have a conversation with, that are willing to actually talk to me about what life feels like for them. Two Jewish women that are watching in their mind things feel like 1930 all over again to them. And I want to, if we don't have the conversation, we just let it fester until we rip a big, horrible Band-Aid off this problem, it's going to be really bad. And if we just can't, why can't we talk about the problem on both sides? Both sides need to have this conversation, because those babies in Gaza don't deserve what's going on either, no doubt. But people like Jane Ginsburg and Sheryl Sandberg are really fascinating me right now, that they're trying to find a way to temper the conversation and not cause, I mean, they've got kids. You got to be careful about what you're saying. And this country should never be, in my mind, I fought for this country. So we have the right to say what we want to say without fear of being physically harmed. And we're not there right now. No. And I find that really hard to accept.
Thank you for that answer. That was very profound, and I appreciate the answer. And I often think about with RBG her just ability to communicate with people that fundamentally disagreed with her in a way that, violated her beliefs, and her ability to reason with them and understand them, and not come at the conversations with them from a place of anger or a place of being accusatory. And that was why she was so successful, and that was the legacy that she left, was because she could communicate with anyone. And she did incredible work for female service members because she was that type of person. So
true.
Yeah. So thank you.
Amazing woman. Yeah.
Well, Phyllis, I could talk to you all day or all evening, since we're recording in the evening, but I know your time is limited. So thank you so much for being here. We do have a small token of appreciation for you.
Can I open it?
Yeah, of course you can. This is your Woman in the Arena podcast bracelet. There is the quote from the Man in the Arena speech that we've paraphrased to the Woman in the Arena. And we hope that you can wear it in all of the incredible work that you do, advocating, honoring, and just telling the stories of women service members of our nation. We're so appreciative of your work, and just hope that you know that here at Iron Butterfly Media, you have a team of ladies that are cheering you on with everything that you do.
Well, keep cheering, because it's a lot of hard work, but I love it, as you can tell. I absolutely love it. And my call to action again is, anybody listening, if you know a woman that has or is serving, their story, I can't tell her story if it's not in there. And nobody will ever, researchers use this national database extensively. It is the only place like it. And that little chapter in your life is important. Maybe it may not seem it to you, but I see granddaughters and grandsons that come and look up one of these ladies in our storyboards, and they're moved to tears. And they're like, I can't believe, but they walk out prouder for knowing that that's their legacy too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
Well, thank you, Phyllis.
Thanks.
The Women in the Arena podcast is powered by Iron Butterfly Media, a production company committed to honoring the lives of women who have had an unseen and outsized impact on our world. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have a woman who you would like to nominate as a guest, please shoot us a message on our social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. See you next time.